All right, we are live here, guys. I didn't have a chance to clean anything up. I went from a wrestling match to basketball. So Benny had a pin tonight, his first match, and then the basketball team. Jared was the point guard and not as successful as Ben. So, anyways, I had a lot of feedback from the last one. I had so much technical difficulty on the live stream I did. I use a software program called StreamYard, and what StreamYard does is it allows me to do a live stream over multiple platforms. And by doing that, people who prefer YouTube can watch on YouTube, and then people who prefer Facebook can watch on Facebook. But what is happening is this live stream software is making 2 live streams on YouTube. So there are some of you that are existing in one reality. There's 2 realities right now. 2 on YouTube. I had to let StreamYard, like I started a ticket for like troubleshooting. I'm like, you guys, when I post this, it makes 2 streams, and now I'm existing in 2 realities. And some of you are on one YouTube stream and some of you are on another. And it's causing issues. And I'm just like, you know what? Who cares? That it is what it is. They'll fix it. Yeah, we do need to get chats going regularly again. But this one's interesting because there has been 3 acquisitions that I know of. CDL purchased MES. There's a purchase agreement. You have Smoky Lake selling to a private individual with investment backers. I saw that. And then recently, I don't know if it's true, but I heard Vermont Evaporator Company sold to CDL as well. And it's interesting, like, why are things moving around? I mean, there was a couple things I wanted to talk about today. But even with Maple Equipment Companies, I see a void. I mean, I do. I see a void. I feel like this is just my perception. This is an opinion. Some of the statements are facts, but it's of my opinion. I believe that any company will be more successful if they learn how to make their customers money. I think that's why Clayton was successful. He uber focused on the farmer's success. If anyone was going to ask me, like, why is MES successful? It is because Clayton Christie 100% focused on the farmer's success over his own. And he learned how to make equipment that helped them process syrup faster and more reasonably. And he did a good job of making farmers more successful. That was his focus. What I am seeing over the last, say, 10 years is some equipment manufacturers are too focused on their success. Of course, you need to make money and make a profit, but that comes if you make other people profit. I used to have this guy who worked with me in the chemical industry. He'd say, Nate, I don't mind if someone makes $1 if I make a dime. And he helped me. Like this guy, he was technically, a service rep for a lot of my customers, and he would help me be successful. And in turn, what do I want to do? I want to help him be successful. How's it going, guys? I'm live streaming. Well, it's 9:00.
Okay. You can go say hi.
Hi, Ainsley. You want to say hi to people? Bunch of maple farmers. It's a maple nerd fest over here. Say hi, Ainsley.
Hey.
That's Ainsley. You want to say hi to Jared? Jared, come say hi. Put your ugly face up here. What, did you have a double-double?
Yeah.
What'd you have?
Hello.
There's Jared. I know you had at least 14 points.
I had 16.
16.
16 points, 13 rebounds, 4 assists.
And like 20 turnovers.
No, I had like 5.
Okay. I got to get back to this.
No?
No. Anyways, where was I? Not a lot of comments here. Success. So focusing on the success of your customer. And this happened to me probably at about, I was probably 27, 28 years old. I was in grad school and I was selling chemicals for a living. And I changed my focus because sometimes when you're in sales, you're in a commission role and you're encouraged to sell based on, your commission, and you're young, you got a young family, so you want to be successful. And then what you do is you focus on your income. It's completely normal and natural. And then as I got older and I read a book, it was called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it was also, I think I read some Zig Ziglar books or books on tape because I was driving a lot, 50,000 miles a year, easy. And it was focusing on your customers' goals. So then I started thinking about the plant managers at these steel mills that I was servicing and that all I cared about was what would make them successful. So what happened is all the, I guess, schemes and systems you build up to help you, they start fading away because they were built on, just trying to make yourself money. And then what I would do is started learning how to make my customers money. And then, once you prime that pump I'm very good at it. And I became very good at it. And I would change my focus on helping my customers succeed. And in turn, as a result, the harvest would come because now people are, oh yeah, the plant manager gives your name to another plant manager. They're in a business group together. And hey, this guy, he saved us $2 million a year. His chemical was a little bit more, but he saved us $2 million a year. And towards the end of my career, before I resigned and just basically decided to do maple full time, I decided who I wanted to work with. I didn't have to choose. I didn't have to deal with people that were going to tell me how to run things. It was like, hey, this is what I do. I think The Goal by Eliyahu Goldratt was very helpful too. Those books. Because then I could start focusing. Anyways, if you're a manufacturer and you make things, your customers are actually dealers unless you sell direct. So like MES was direct. Smoky Lake is a direct. I think they have some sub-dealers. But your customers are actually, it's who is your industry. This will tie to a lot of things in maple that I see. Your industry, and it can only be in one, right? So what is your industry? I'm a maple syrup equipment manufacturer that sells to a dealer network. So, or I sell direct. But when we were in grad school, this got beat into us, and it was probably the most valuable thing was references of books from other students and understanding the industry. And I've always thought maple was somehow exempt because I'm like, no, maple's different. It's so small. You can make syrup, bottle syrup, and sell equipment, and you can do them all. And it's actually a really bad idea. It is. Because you won't be able to focus on any of them in any particular way. So then you look at companies, you see how successful Bascom is. You're like, that's the model. That's the formula. But what you didn't see is, how we built it over time. We see it and we're like, okay, so this is the formula. You bottle syrup. Well, you make syrup, you bottle syrup, you sell equipment, and then you all these maple goodies. And then you look at it, that's what I thought I was supposed to do. And I did get into the equipment side because I thought that was the model. But when you're trying to build a maple syrup bottling business, you really aren't going to be able to focus on the syrup production side as well. And there are people that do it. And believe me, I used to think that, that professor, that finance professor was wrong, that maple was an exemption of this rule. And doing one thing really well is actually hard to do. Like doing something and being really, really good at it, really proficient, and doing multiple things really well is really hard. So I think we call it mission creep at Bissell Maple Farm, where, I will get out there and try to do things that are non-maple related. I have to have my hobbies and I make excuses. So I need to put my oxygen mask on. before I help people with my own. And that's why I think oftentimes people will say, they'll think what I'm saying is opinion. And often it is actually my experience. Like I did this. I was having this conversation with Damien the other day from Shaver Hill. I said, I blew an insane amount of money learning how not to do things early on because, we were talking about the growth in the last 5 years of Bissell Maple Farm. And I'm like, yeah, but you didn't see the 15 before that, right? You only see the results, but you didn't see the 15 before that where I invested in the wrong people. I invested in the wrong things. I tried to start 3 businesses at once. And when I see entrepreneurs do this, it makes me cringe. I cannot stand my 30-year-old self. And I'm going, oh. And then you try to give them advice. And they think you're crazy because you do something over here that isn't right. And they'll say, well, he doesn't even do this right. It's like, well, yeah, but the grass is still green, Like just because I do this over here wrong, or in your opinion wrong or incorrectly, just because I can't make maple syrup as good as the really good syrup makers doesn't mean that I'm wrong about this. And that's an interesting, people do that a lot. They'll make a decision, or they'll talk themselves into a decision. I'll give you an example. I heard a story the other day about what I call, there's primary, secondary, and tertiary packers. And to me, the primary packers are the big ones, the $100 million. Probably, there's probably 3 of them in the United States. And then you have the secondary packers who do have SQF and the quality programs in place, but they're not $100 million. They're probably not even $50 million. But there's this middle range, right? The biggest ones can go and do a Costco or part of the Costco business. The smallest ones, yeah, we can't, the secondary ones, we really can't. We're not big enough. It would be silly for somebody to give us that business. And then I have what I call the tertiary packers. And the tertiary packers are like, they just don't want to step off the cliff and get that SQF. They just don't want to. They just don't want to, take that big step that's really, hard and dangerous, and it's risky, right? And there's a tertiary packer that I heard of that is paying somebody to label jugs. And that person said, why don't you just label get a labeler, get one yourself. And his response was, well, my sugar house doesn't have heat. And I hear I'm shocked at some of the logic, right? Because that's all I've done over the last 7 years is really learn like decision-making processes and helping myself get out of my own way. And I heard this and I told the guy, I said, if you actually went in and put heat in his sugar house for him at no charge, he'd be pissed because now his excuse is gone. What it is he really doesn't want to do it. But not having heat in the sugar house is the reason. I just, it's amazing how we can tell ourselves stories and talk ourselves into things or not into things. And it's just decision making. That's all I think about. Like, you can accidentally be right with the wrong logic. You can be, there's 4 ways to make a decision. You can make the right decision for the right reasons, right decision for the wrong reasons, wrong decision for the right reasons, and wrong decision for the wrong reasons. And if you cannot identify any of your decisions in the past, that you have done one of those, like you really got to start thinking about it. Like I've been able to identify those things, and we had a lot of success early on with bourbon barrel aged maple syrup. I thought I was a genius. I mean, we were getting $1 a fluid ounce by the semi truckload. It was awesome. But I didn't know my costs. And pretty soon, I got my butt whooped. So because the results were good, I thought I was doing the right things. So I was accidentally right with the wrong logic, and it eventually caught me. And I think we do this a lot with decision making. If we don't want to do something, we go look for the reasons as to why we shouldn't or don't want to. So anyways, it's a lot of blabbing, a lot of bloviating. So got some comments here. Yep. Clayton is a genius. I'm sad to see him sell, but I'm happy for him. Hopefully he sticks around and keeps that customer connection that has kept people coming back. Yeah, earlier I stated that really was, from my observation and traveling with him and meeting his customers and getting to know them and basically living with them. I'm like, they love him because he truly cares about them over himself. It's a fact. That's what built his business. Is he will always do what he says he's going to do, and he truly cared about his customers' success. And I know that he's going to stay on for a while, and I think he's going to do everything he can. But that culture, they're buying MES, but how do you get that into your culture if your culture already exists? I don't know. I'm not, it's where I was going with, if you have a dealer network, your job as an equipment manufacturer is to make your dealers money. True. It's true. But also the dealer's job, who's their customer, is to make their customers more efficient and more profitable, help them make money. If you help your customer make money, they'll buy from you. And I think the steam rigs that Clayton made help farmers produce better, faster. He helped them make more money by saving them time, saving them wages, making people more efficient. You can boil more in a day, all sorts of things. But he uber focused on it. And I don't know any other equipment companies that are, that's their sole, like they have owners. What do owners want to return? They're investing in the business and they want to return. And are you working? And if you work for your customers and help your customers succeed, you will make a return for ownership. It's true. I mean, that, you won't have to worry about it. So, yeah, I will get more into the equipment a little bit, but some comments here. Do you really need a hydrometer for boiling sap? I only want to tap a handful of trees for myself. This is a great question. I'm super excited to announce basically what I'm doing is I'm going back to the beginning. I am going back to how I started our business, and I'm going to start with sap buckets, some spiles, and some firewood and an evaporator, and I'm going to go and I'm going to document and show what I would do if I started over. I basically tore all the tubing out of my woods. So year one, it's going to be my 2x8 wood-fired evaporator, and I'm going to teach like where I messed up, what I would do different if I had to start over. And I don't think there's enough of this. I don't think there's enough of this content out there. But basically, I'm not the greatest syrup maker in the world by a long shot, but I want to teach if you wanted to start a maple syrup company. If somebody were to ask me, Nate, if you were to start a maple syrup company, what would you do? I'd say, what would your first purchase be? I'd buy a canner. That's what I'd do. I'd buy a canner. I'm going to be talking at the New York winter meeting. I think it's in the Catskills this year. I just got an email today, like what my times are. And I'll talk about this because, what is your industry? What is your business? Are you going to make syrup and sell it bulk? Are you going to make syrup and bottle it? How are you going to set your business up? And I think these are some of the questions, and I want to go through the logic and the flawed logic that I had and all the mess ups, like how many times I screwed up and bought something just because I wanted it or I didn't want to work that hard, and I didn't let the business earn it. I had a job, and I told myself, well, I have a job, and I'll get that nice Kawasaki mule to go get sap, right? And I didn't let the business earn it. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit and like how I would set up. But I'm going to start at the beginning. And the question is do you really need a hydrometer if you're boiling a little bit of sap? truth is no. But you do need to know that maple syrup is 7 degrees over the boiling point of water, which is rarely 212. So my dad would always make syrup to 219 if the boiling point of water that day was 212. So what you need to do, it's real simple. You need to put a pot of water on and boil it and measure the temperature that day. It's boiling. What is the temperature? You record that. And then you go 7 degrees over that to make maple syrup. And that should be 66 bricks. So you don't need a hydrometer if you're a small operation, but that is the key. So there are really, I guess, 3 things that I'm starting with that I think are important, that I think are missing. After telling you that you should just have one business and focus on it, I'm now telling you, like, I am starting a smaller company to serve a need that I probably shouldn't be doing, but I've found enough partners and willingness and demand and people who buy syrup for us that will be our dealers, because I can't deal direct. I just don't have the time. I probably will a little bit locally in Ohio until we are able to build up, a dealer in the area. It could be our own dealer, could acquire one. Oh boy, here they're coming now. I need somebody to be a what do you call them? Moderators. I mean, it's just, great, funny question. So here's some questions. So that I hope that answers your question on the hydrometer. If you were going to produce in any serious volume, yeah, it's important. But the other thing that just boggles my mind is why people don't use a temperature compensated hydrometer cup. I don't understand it. I really don't. I'm going to show and teach how to use one of those, why it's important, how simple it is. We'll have our own chart. I got the one I have from the Maple guys. I run my entire business with them. Millions of pounds of syrup, and we run everything with a temperature compensated hydrometer cup that was made by the Maple guys back in the day, Chris, and came with a chart, and I love it. I don't recommend making syrup without it. It is. And then we buy syrup from hundreds of farmers, and it's rare that, syrup's on, sometimes syrup's on spec, but that's really our job. That's really what we get paid to do, is we take maple syrup from multiple sources, match flavor to what the customers demand, and make sure it's the same every time. And it's really hard to make from drum to drum the same every time, let alone, multiple drums in small batches, basically. So that's basically our business is. We are paid to make the same thing every time, with as high quality as possible. And without a temperature compensated hydrometer cup, which I will have, it'll be available. We haven't launched our website yet, but that's probably the most important tool that we have in our packing business. And we do use the digital refractometer. I'm very familiar with these things. It turns out that going to school for chemistry ended up being pretty helpful. And then having a career in chemistry, chemical engineering, and learning these different things outside of Maple and then bringing it back, it's been helpful. So even checking color, like these things are things that I did in undergrad. I mean, we built these things to measure light transmittance. So I know a lot about them, and I don't know that anyone has just really broken it down for people. Like, what is it? How does it work? So anyways, more questions. Saw some coming in. Yeah, this is common too. So I'm going to paraphrase this comment that came up that a fellow was boiling sap out in the open and with a wood fire, and he said the syrup wasn't edible due to too much smoke flavor from the outdoor fire. Listen, some people love that. Me, I've had it before. I've had people that are very proud, and I don't try to hurt people's feelings. I go, this is good. If they really want my honest truth, I don't know, but it tastes like you're eating maple syrup out of an ashtray. It's just not the way I would. If I wanted smoked maple, it'd be different. And I think Bob's smoked maple is probably the best I've had. And he, does a really good job. I think it's cold smoked and everything. And but that's what you're expecting. So when you're expecting pure maple syrup, and it comes in and it tastes like Marlboro, not really what you had in mind. So this is a good question by J.R. Jenner. MES had the best membranes. Do you think they will continue making them? I think that was probably part of the acquisition. It is true. And now CDL owns that technology and the supplier relationship. And I agree. Nobody liked hearing it, but it was said over and over, So just the weird things that are, I'm expecting coming forward. Let's see. I think people are sending me messages. I have no idea. So yeah, what is the maple equipment manufacturer's job? Should be to make their customer money. Who's the customer? Is it a dealer? Is it the farmer? It's kind of both, but in all reality, in the strict rule, it's the dealer. And that's a whole nother can of worms, right? Dealer, like, how can you have 30 dealers in one area? Like, you have to, protect dealers. And I've had this conversation a lot with Fred over the years because he, was in on the appliance repair business and big Maytag fan, and very, very much understands the, service is important. So for any manufacturer, having a really good dealer that can be the first line of defense. And if any of you have gone through what I've gone through, is oftentimes your dealer makes syrup themselves, and you need help. And we had a rule, and still do. If we were making syrup and somebody else couldn't, we made sure to take care of them. And now with these, the bulk, the refrigerated bulk tanks, being in control of your schedule is, it's never been easier to have a professional career and make maple syrup. With the automation, being able to concentrate and keep your sap cold, I don't think it's ever been a better time. You could be a professional, have a career, and really, run it on the weekends or evenings, and it's pretty awesome. So I'm excited. So what I'm doing this year, I talked a little bit about it on YouTube. On this live stream was going back to the beginning, and I'll talk a little bit about YouTube and what I've learned over the last it's 3.5 years now of really trying to purposely grow the channel. And I tell everybody at the beginning I had the wrong motives, because I was watching a lot of YouTube during COVID, and like a lot of people, you're like watching it in these outdoor channels, you start looking at it and, man, I think I could mill some lumber. So I love the channel Sawing with Sandy. This guy basically taught me how to run my sawmill. And I'm telling everybody my playbook. And a lot of people don't agree, which is why I'm going to tell you, because the same people that'll tell you why it won't work, I'm running the ball up the middle, and it won't matter because they don't agree. And it's a good thing. Like, I'm actually glad that they don't see the value of content creation like most other manufacturers and industries do. So I got in for the wrong reasons at the beginning. I wanted free stuff. I saw these guys getting tractors, and I'm like, dude, I can do this. At least I'm like funny. Like this guy ain't even funny. Like I want to make videos and I'm gonna do this. And I got into it, and man, it was hard. It was like a whole nother like career. And I just jumped in, dude, all in, like learn how to edit, editing software. Oh, that camera, you just make so many mistakes. You just go after it. And if I didn't have Jacob helping me with editing, and Danny helping me, like I just can't do it. Like there's just no way without help. I would have to basically get up at 3, in bed by 6, and it'd be really hard without partners. And I learned through like what you guys wanted to watch, and it was touring other sugar houses. And that's really what built the channel, is getting to other sugar houses and putting free content out that would be helpful. The Dan Crocker videos, the Sideland Sugar Works videos are probably some of the most helpful videos to maple producers. And I still get people that argue with me. Like, I'm like, I don't know, man, call them. Like they want to tell me, why they can't label their own jugs because they don't have heat in their sugar house. And I just don't want to hear it. Like, I'm like, I don't know. Ask him. Like they want to argue, and it's just go change your reality. Don't say your reality can't change and everything else is wrong. Anyways, I still get people that'll come at me and be like, well, why does he do this? Why? I don't know. Freaking, I just made the video, dude. Like he's way smarter than me, way better at it. Go ask him. But yeah, another question coming in. There goes Ainsley again. It's all right. You're making the live stream entertaining. Oh, you got to leave?
Yeah.
All right, we'll catch you.
Yeah.
With so many mid-sized 10,000 to 30,000 tap producers in Vermont, would a co-op be beneficial to pool production to try to increase returns, or would Quebec avoid the effort? That's a really good question. That's a really good question. I haven't really thought about it. That's a good one. That's almost a topic for a live stream itself. I want to stick to I like the questions, but I really want to stick to like the equipment acquisitions, what's happened. You think about it over the last few years, you got H2O buying Leader. There's just more happening, and we really don't have a strong, large U.S. I shouldn't say strong. I should just say a large multi-service U.S.-based equipment company. I see this as risky. With geopolitical things, tariffs, doesn't matter what you think of them. They exist. So another book, or 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is understanding principles like gravity. Like, you can't fight it, so why argue about it? There's nothing you can change. So move forward. What are you going to do? But right now, like there's a 25% tariff. Canada has a 25% tariff on U.S. syrup. That's why the irony of the whole Ronald Reagan ad they did was so interesting to me, because they meaning whoever the prime minister was, I think they rolled that ad out, and it's Ronald Reagan talking about free markets. And I still I'm a free market guy. Like I am, but it's a one-way free market. Like right now, if Canadians wanted to buy U.S. syrup, they'd have to pay a 25% tariff going north. Why is that? Like, we don't have a tariff, but I'm expecting maybe some retaliatory things. I mean, they're going to renegotiate NAFTA, and so when I saw that ad, I thought it was interesting because it was rules for thee, but not for me. And everything Reagan was saying was true. But what they're not saying is everything Reagan's saying was true, but we're not doing it. And did you guys know that Canada tariffs maple syrup 25%? I mean, I assume that's why CDL got into like the acquisition of Prestige, because you couldn't skip the whole, payment from the packer to the farmer. They got into a whole nother business. So you got CDL selling equipment to farmers, but in order for the dealers or CDL to get paid, the way the capital would flow it's controlled by the Packers. So it's interesting. They're going to basically become a Packer. They did. They bought Prestige. That's a big packaging outfit. But now all the syrup that they were going to buy in the U.S. to go north, like it's 25% more. Like Canada actually hurt their own industry by putting that tariff on there. So yeah, like we don't like equipment, like tubing, like it's all going to be tariffed coming across the border. I think if it like sap tanks, for example, I think sap tanks have a tariff because the government has stated they could be used for other things other than maple, which I've never, I guess, but sap tanks are typically, probably 99.9% used for sap. So I have some bulk tanks I purchased for syrup that I'm going to end up paying a tariff on. I think they're supposed to be made in like March or something, or I don't know when they're coming over. But they are, for us, they're for syrup, but they're silos. And I'm going to end up paying a tariff. So I'm just wondering, like, how can we help maple producers with profitability? It's, getting costs down and just an arbitrary tariff. An arbitrary tariff that is not going to anything to help the producers, really. But there is definitely protectionism north of the border. Like you can't deny that they do really good with the dairy. I think dairy, lumber, maple's very controlled, and it's not two ways. We don't tariff. We weren't tariffing their milk. That I don't believe. I don't know. I just remember anytime you talk to a dairy farmer, they're talking about Canada dumping milk into the United States and cheese and whatever. But yeah, so the most profitable thing for maple equipment companies is tubing, plastic beads. And I would expect with oil and more exploration, a lot of these plastics, my first job out of college, I worked for a titanium dioxide company, which makes pigments, which is like basically the backbone of paint. But also it can be used in plastic. And we were owned by Equistar, and they would move these like beads that end up becoming everything, plastic bottles and, plastic jugs and tubing that typically comes from like Galveston, Texas, down there where they're, it's an oil-based product, plastic. And if the price of oil is down, you would expect the price of tubing to go down. I think in the long run, tubing will become more competitive because more players will get into it. Even for me, I'm starting with just a simple evaporator. I am only selling a 2x8 wood-fired evaporator because I said I'm going back to the beginning, and I'm explaining to people what I would do if I started over. And I've had two 2x6s. I started on a 2x4 flat pan. It was English tin. That was my dad's evaporator. He bought it in 1976 from, W.W. Maines. I think his name was Maines. He was in Orwell, and then Carl Evans bought that business. But it was a flat pan. And then we moved. It was like night and day. You go from a 2x4 flat pan that had like the two separators to a 2x6 with a 4-foot drop flue. It's like night and day. And we were probably only getting 35 gallons an hour of evaporation off that 2x6, but it was so much better than the flat pan. And our next upgrade was a 2.5 by 8 foot wood-fired evaporator from Leader. Bruce Gillen came out, explained it all, looked at what we were going to do, took the measurements, definitely made some great recommendations. And that was like our first bigger evaporator. It had steam away. It had the arch door. It wasn't gasification. I don't know the name of the arch, but it had the insulation of the door would pull away. It was really nice compared to I wish I never would have sold that D&G 2x6 drop flue. That thing was awesome. I wish I still had it because I I would have that thing hung up in the building, because I think I bought it for $1,700, $1,750, and ended up selling it for like $3,500 at Ray Gingrich's auction. It's like, man, I wish I just would have kept it. But you're not thinking about that when you're thinking about upgrading. You're trying to figure out how to pay for your next upgrade. And yeah, wish I would have kept it. So then went to the bigger evaporator at the Sugar Works. There was a 4x14 natural gas evaporator with a steam away, and that thing was a hoss, man. It would cost us $3 or $9 an hour to run that thing because natural gas is so cheap. And so I boiled on, and then we also got a 2x6 from Leader to be in we did this collaboration with Goose Island, and they actually came out and filmed us. I'll have to put a link in this. It goes back a ways, but they sent us a 2x6 because I'm like, hey, this would be good. I think Brad sent it to them, and it got them good publicity. I think that episode had like 20,000 views, professionally done. It's probably 15 years old now, that episode. You know what? No, it's probably maybe 8 or 9 years. I don't know. But there's some good questions coming in here. I get asked these questions all the time. This fella says, Sully's Maple says, yes, I paid a large tariff on a DNG tank earlier this year. Reese Martin says, who do you think makes the best tubing right now? I get asked this twice a day. There's emails coming in every day wanting to know what my opinion is. And I'm going to get into that. Make sure I come back to that because I think this is an important topic. I don't tell people which tubing is best. They value my opinion probably more than they should on that. And then 4Kids Farm says, are you sure that Canada has a tariff on American maple syrup? Yes. I guess I haven't read it myself, but from what I can tell, there is a 25% tariff based on my sources. So I don't know. Prior to that, there was no way I would ever ship syrup north because even if there wasn't a tariff, I had a feeling it would end up, in some warehouse embargoed for like 8 years. And then 8 years later, like, okay, you can have your maple syrup. Like, it may not be tariff, but it is going to be difficult to get it in there. I have no idea. But as far as I know, and a lot of syrup that was headed for prestige, from what I understand, was sold off to other outlets because it wasn't going to be feasible to use it at a 25% premium. Yeah. That's the logic of shipping syrup north to only come back to the U.S. is mind-boggling. Peter Gregg called me. We talked the other day. We texted. He wanted to know if I had any comments on bulk syrup market, and I said, Peter, that's like asking a mouse on the forest floor that's walking in the moss what they think of the mountain that's ahead of them. Like the more I know, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. But I want to keep learning. But there's different, there's syrup trading both ways for different things. Like your mind would boggle your mind if you saw the things that we get asked and opportunities, and just it's amazing like what syrups used in, and it's pretty cool actually. There's new markets growing, but if you think about it, if you have a packer in Ontario and then need syrup, getting it from the UP, which is I think pretty common for one of the bigger operations out there. It's over by Sault Ste. Marie. I've never visited, but there's a pretty good sized maple operation over there, and there is some syrup definitely being traded from the U.S. to Canada. So who knows? And it's really hard to figure out what's true, what's not. Like, I swear, once I get to figure out the source, I'm just going to have a ticker in front of my building. I'll put it online because I think everybody should know everything. So it's an interesting question. Did MES get pressured into selling? I don't think so. No, I don't think Clayton would do anything he didn't want to do. I just think he's ready for, to chase his dreams. He's really good at what he does. Good questions, though. Keep them going. I do want to come back to, what I do is when people come to me and ask me my opinions, I try to find out where the location is, and then I send them to dealers that I partner with and buy syrup from. So I send leads all the time to people that buy syrup for me, because, man, if I can help my suppliers make money, why not? I want to be a good partner and send people their way, and it's part of why I think this channel is interesting. But I have 3 stories I'm weaving together, and I gotta just finish one. I was talking about getting into YouTube, why I did it, and I wanted to be able to tell my own story and people get to know me instead of somebody hear it from somebody and they can put their own twist on things. And I wanted to have direct access to the people I'm talking to, you, and that way people can ask their own questions and ask me, what I think. So I don't know. Steve says, just asked AI if Canada has tariffs on U.S. maple syrup. No, Canada does not currently place tariffs on American maple syrup. Maple syrup imported into Canada is typically exempt from taxes. Let's see if I can find my source. I'm going to text my source real quick. Who was telling me that? It was a very credible source. And I should have done more digging before I said something, but who was it that told me? I'm texting somebody that will know. So, is there currently a tariff on USA maple syrup heading into Canada? And I believe it was 25%. It was oddly specific for something that didn't exist. So texting somebody right now that would know. Found out that the primary viewer really liked looking at sugar houses because a lot of sugar houses, you're typically making syrup. So being able to see other people operate during the time that you're making syrup had a lot of value for producers. And giving away free content and free information helps build trust and it helps build brand. And it has. So Bruce is always asking me, why are you doing? Bruce Bascom's why do you do that YouTube? What is in it for you? I'm like, it has infinite value. It has had infinite value with the connections I've made. And I think about how it happened. If I didn't have the YouTube channel, I would have never met Scott Dunn. Scott Dunn would have never taken me up to Jackman, Maine, and then, I was able to meet people, and going up to Jackman, Maine led to meeting Clayton Christie. And then Clayton was ended up being the source. And then people were texting Clayton and asking, hey, can they come make a video on our operation? It was cool. But that has infinite value because I've met people I never would have met. So this is a good question. Reese Martin asks, have you found anyone to fill a tanker full of syrup for you this year for a video? No. I'd love to do that. I think it'd be cool to fill evaporator. There's a few producers that are large enough to do that, to fill a tanker right off the evaporator and just save the packaging, why put it in a tote? And I'll tell you what the tanker thing, why it's a challenge and why totes are working really well for us. We provide totes to our syrup buyers and some producers. The manufacturer's close. The investment's really, really better than drums. It's cheaper to buy a IBC tote than it is to buy steel one-way drums. They have a value. Like at the end, drums get turned into burn barrels, but IBC totes have a secondary value. If somebody has a camp, you're putting food grade product in there, they can use it for a water source. It just has a life beyond. So there's a bottom on the totes. A lot of guys will take the bottle out and use the cage for firewood. You can actually kiln dry firewood if you wanted to speed up the aging process if you have more demand. So you can use these cage totes and stick them in a kiln. So like totes are valuable, and totes. The tough thing about tankers is it's just you're deadheading one way. And at least with moving totes around, it saves a ton of time. IBC stands for intermediate bulk container, and I'm going to sneeze. Hold on. Meaning it's in between, it's the intermediate step to going full bulk. And why IBC works well is a dry van can take the syrup. So trucks like Lauren, if they're taking trucks one way, they can backhaul. And there's no value really in backhauling a dedicated syrup tanker. I guess it could be up to that trucking company, but I don't want to leave a tanker load of maple syrup up to a trucking company. Like, I'm just not going to trust that things are clean. I'm not. It's too expensive. Okay, here's a comment. It says Canada might have had a tariff in retaliation to U.S. tariffs, but I don't think they currently do. That could be true. That could be true. It might have been like a window, and I might be making a statement that it is a current thing, but it was probably a window snapshot, and it may not occur anymore. But hopefully somebody out here will know or see or have experience. Anyways, good question here, Reese. How long does syrup stay good in totes for? Well, a lot of totes in Canada right now, IBCs are being used, but they're actually using a liner. And I don't know, I didn't know why exactly the liner was being used, but I think I figured out that it's because it's difficult to get some of those lids on the IBCs to seal at 100% success rate. Now we're working on this because we're doing a lot of studies, and I'd be happy to share them like as we get them. I think it's good for the industry. Saves a lot of packaging, a lot of handling, a lot of labor, a lot of time. Filling totes is way better than filling drums. So, yeah, we've been working on it, and we've had a pretty good success rate, and have had to, implement some liquid nitrogen into the process, because if you just put hot syrup in there, it'll actually shrink down the tote. It won't harm it. It just looks ugly. It's really optics. The bottle will actually pull the bars down, and then when you put syrup in, hot, with too much liquid nitrogen, it'll actually balloon up, and you're just like, whoa, this thing's going to blow, So we've done a lot of the experimenting, so we'll be able to help people, hey, if the syrup's this temperature, use this much. If the syrup's this temperature, there's going to be a scale on how much to use when. But I think there's also some issues. Like, I would never use a used IBC tote off the evaporator. Do not do that. I would not do that. So some good questions. So how long does it stay good for? In the cooler, we haven't had any issues. I don't think there's anything better than stainless. I think the consumption of the syrup in the IBC totes has been so quick that we haven't had to worry about degradation. I'm sure oxygen, gets into the plastic where it does not happen with stainless. Like, stainless is the ultimate, but stainless totes are just so expensive. But I think we have a tote sitting in our warehouse that we did, long ago, and we want to open it up like in 2-3 years and see. So we're kind of in testing. with it, so we can, with certainty, tell our customers. So we don't really have a long shelf life yet. I think we just say 6 months. And that's because at the time, we were supposed to put 2 totes up in the high temperature of our warehouse, so it would be warm, kind of like worst case scenario. And so one of them got used by accident, so we had one, and the customer's like, "Well, how long?" So we opened it, and so that test ended at 6 months. Now we have to start over to get to a year, 2 years, and letting 3,500 pounds of maple syrup sit around is kind of expensive. It's an expensive test, but I think it needs to happen. I do not like the cardboard wine bag in a box. I call them like the wine bag in a box totes. They're common. They're called spacecraft. It's a good idea. There's some benefits. Like when you ship them from the manufacturer to the customer, they're folded up. So you can get a lot more in like a semi truck. So, but you can only get so many empty totes in a semi truck because they aren't collapsible. So the collapsible ones, it's far more efficient, but the manufacturer for us is in Cleveland. So when we want them, we can just go pick them up with our box truck. We order them, go pick them up. And then I think it's like $215 for brand new ones is our price. And they have a 2-inch cam lock. There's a foil seal on the bottom. So brand new, like $215, and then plus our time to go get them. And then what happens is we'll put them into circulation with our syrup buyers. And then we got to start tracking them, like a tracking system. Like once it gets to like the second, third use, either sell it to smaller sappers or firewood guys. But there's certainly a value, and I don't think there's anything more green than reuse. Like recycling is nice. Like that's what spacecraft goes on. Oh, it's all recyclable. Yeah, but you got to build it, and I mean, there's a lot of cardboard, and that cardboard needs to be crushed. And I'm just shocked at how many of our customers, like I basically said, I'm not doing this anymore because I had too many, accidents from trucking companies. Like it was just crazy. And, I'm sure somebody will eventually put a fork through one of those things, like a forklift fork. But we had so many issues with the bag in the box. But I think it's the same type, how long is it going to last on one of those? It's probably the same. It's a real thin mill plastic. It's like a liquid trash bag. It's a trash bag is what it is. So we're doing studies. So another question came in. How do you make granulated maple sugar from maple syrup? That's a good question. Maple sugar is the original maple product. It's the original. Maple syrup came after. All maple syrup was made all the way into maple sugar well before maple syrup came around. Refrigeration needed to be invented before maple syrup existed. So maple sugar, granulated sugar, was the OG maple product. That's why we're called sugar makers. We make syrup in a sugar shack, sugar house. When we make syrup, we're sugaring. We have a sugar bush, sugar. The word sugar is used a lot because that's the original nomenclature for maple producers. And, when you're given a tour, most people don't know that. So when I give tours of my place, I talk about how maple sugar was traded, between Native Americans and settlers, and, it could keep. So maple sugar, if you think about it, maple syrup is 66% sugar. So you take 11 pounds of maple syrup, 66% of that 11 pounds is sugar. So if you cook all of the water out, you should be left with the granular part. Now, there's a little more science to it. I think only about half the crop, maybe. It's growing, though. The early syrup, you need something called low invert sugar, which is further away from glucose. So high invert sugar would be like Pepsi. These natural sugars are going to want to farm crystals more easily. So there's a range that you have to use. We actually use a glucose meter to measure the invert level so we can make sure that the syrup we're using is going to be useful for sugar. You want to know you're going to win before you start. Does that make sense? But essentially, you remove the water from the correct maple syrup. Not all maple syrup will make maple sugar. I hope that makes sense. It's like all maple sugar is made from maple syrup, but not all maple syrup will make maple sugar. It's like saying all bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon. Do I use stainless totes? We do. We do have them around the shop. Sometimes we'll have to make a small batch blend for somebody. It has to be specific, state specific. So we'll have to source syrup from a specific state. So we have some customers that want Ohio syrup, and they're not huge, so you can blend it in like a 350-gallon tote. I made the mistake of buying used ones many years ago, and it was a nightmare. I think I paid $300 per 250-gallon stainless tote. And because I know how to clean stainless, I can literally pickle it. So it didn't matter what was in it. But what we didn't know is ball valves hide material behind them. So when you open and close a ball valve, whatever's in there is going to hide inside. And these totes were used for menthol, which is in toothpaste. So we ended up having to replace all of the valves. And that's a whole cost you're not expecting. But I was able to clean the totes, no problem. I can clean anything. That's what I did for a living. But when you get into it, there's some things that, do you really want to source something used that you don't know what's in it? I'm very careful about, stainless. Like I've been in these factories. There's a lot of carcinogens that go into stainless, and just because it's stainless doesn't mean you should use it for food if it's a used piece of equipment. That's actually a good story. Our bourbon barrel-aged maple syrup came from the idea of Irv Gingrich called me once. He's in Middlefield, Ohio. And he said, Nate, we got this syrup that came up from Kentucky. And I know you use some lemon in your barbecue sauce. And, this syrup, it has a lemon flavor. Really? That's odd. So you go there, and this was a semi-truckload, man. And I'm going back 20 years, almost 20 years. And these farmers from Kentucky, they were Amish. They wanted to save a few bucks, so they bought some used plastic food-grade drums. They were clear. I'll never forget it. And it held a lemon flavoring. So it's food grade. So like lemon, like for like Laffy Taffy, Dum Dum Suckers, because it wasn't a natural lemon. It was like floor soap lemon. And all the syrup, because they thought they washed it. Well, do you think they washed it with some water that was 219 degrees? I mean, most water heaters probably aren't even. So this is the thing I'm warning anybody who's trying to save money. In the end, there's a huge risk. Anyways, it was like $70,000 worth of syrup that's ruined because they wanted to save some money on drums. I'll never forget that. And I was driving home, and I'm just like, man, they could have used bourbon barrels. At least it would have increased the value. So if it wasn't for those farmers, trying to cut corners and save, whatever, $25, whatever it was probably got them for free. I never would have really gone down that road of ruining maple syrup with a bourbon barrel to increase the value. I hope that's helpful. What else you guys got? Keep me on track too, because I had several stories that I get off track easy. Why the YouTube channel was important. So got into it. I wanted free stuff. Then I realized where the value was for the viewer. Make videos and show other maple operations. And I have a lot of things that I like doing too as well. So it, milling, there's other benefits. But getting to meet farmers I never would have met. So it had infinite value to meet people. And then I've made friends with people I'll be friends with for life that also have YouTube channels and collaborate with them. That's probably one of the most underrated, undervalued thing with having a YouTube channel is you meet other YouTubers because your family doesn't want to hear about it anymore. They don't care, you know. Never tell your family you have a YouTube channel. They won't care. They live with you. They don't need to watch you. Your mom isn't going to watch you. They already know you. So, and now, like, I went to some manufacturers at the beginning, and it's a good thing that deals never happened. I mean, I wasn't in my right mental state. I had a lot of stress and stuff I was dealing with, and I was a smart aleck to some of them for sure. I said, I think this YouTube thing's going to be kind of big. I'm watching these other channels, and they're doing it for tractors and lawnmowers, and I have friends that and I've still to this day have been receiving. I'm starting to get free stuff, so I'm starting to get things. It's starting to like actually be kind of cool that I can talk to these equipment manufacturers, the owners of these companies. Like I have like friends that own firewood processor companies, on my cell phone that I can call. It's just the people I've met. They're really cool people, and I am running the ball up the middle and telling you the play. I was talking about selling with Sandy and buying that. I have a Woodland Mills HM 130 Max sawmill, and it's a great bargain. And I watched this guy for like 100 hours, and I was like, man, I feel pretty comfortable. I'm going to buy that mill because he taught me how to run it. And I was way more comfortable buying something that I knew there was a catalog of videos. If I ever got stuck, he had to change a bearing, he had to do whatever. I can go back and look at the video and fix it myself and do it. And, when I started really getting into syrup, we had the Maple Trader. And most of what I learned was from people posting on that. And not everybody was correct about things. But now with, being able to make a video, look you in the eye and say, hey, this is what I've done. This is what worked. This is what didn't, and explain it. I think there's going to be value on that because I've already experienced it and I've already seen it. I don't need proof. I can look at a pattern and apply it to other industries. They stuck beer in bourbon barrels, right? They put glitter in beer. They made spicy beer. And then you just transfer that over to another industry. But with the equipment side, I'm actually kind of excited. There isn't a U.S. manufacturer that's sizable. And, I've got a few friends that are going to help me do this. And I'm pretty excited about it, actually. So I'm only making the 2x8. I'm skipping the 2x6 because if somebody wants a 2x6, I'm not your guy. You can go to Smoky Lake. I'll put the website. I will send you to other vendors. I have no interest in the 2x6. I know sometimes sugar houses are small. It's okay. I get it. I'm only making a 2x8 because that's what I'm going to run. And that's what I'm going to teach people to run. And it's left side draw off. Sorry. Everything's on the left side because that's how I'm making it. And that's how I'm able to have them made in a quantity to keep costs down. It's a nice system, gasification arch, bells and whistles. And it's our brand because I realized by all the other equipment companies saying, no, thanks, Nate. I wasn't going to push a rope uphill. And instead of selling other people's things, I'm going to sell my own. And I'm not owned by anybody, so I can give my opinion on things, which is nice. This is a great question here. Would a used tote that just held permeate water for cleaning ROs affect the taste of the syrup? No. That's just my professional scientific opinion. Steve has a good question. Can you talk about the economics of starting a sugaring operation? There's an operation in my area in Vermont that has 20,000 taps, beautiful sugar house, excellent equipment, asking $2.5 million. It is all a math equation. I think one of the reasons there's such an advantage of maple production in Canada is crown land. So there's a lot of government-owned land that can be leased, And I think the tap cost comes out to be like 30 cents a tap, Canadian. So whatever that is, US. It's not very expensive, but you lease it by the hectare, and it's just maple trees, like all maple trees, and you can do 30-year leases. And in the United States, it's very difficult, I think, to have access to that much land. The economics of maple, if I was going to do it and start over, I would go to the UP, or I would go to Wisconsin, or possibly Maine. I think it would be too difficult. You're competing with too many people in Vermont that, probably aren't really farmers. They just like the idea of I'm talking about competing with other buyers. So owning a maple farm in Vermont, I think it was in Wedding Crashers, he joked about it, right? We're going to start a maple syrup conglomerate in Vermont. I happen to know everything there's known by maple syrup. And they're arguing, but you're going to compete with people that, have fun money, and owning a sugar house in Vermont sounds cool, and because it is. And you will have less competition in the North Woods of Wisconsin for real estate. And the economics of buying an existing maple operation in Vermont, what's the average age of sugar makers now? I heard the other day it was like 65, like the average age. It was like, we don't have a lot of younger maple producers coming up. A lot more gray hair in the sugar houses than not. That's a good question. I do think at some point down the road, I would like to buy a small maple operation in Vermont. It is something I would like to do, and probably have our own depot to transfer syrup. For me, it would be mostly for logistics, but also I think it'd be kind of cool to have an operation that would pay for itself. Oftentimes the pretty ones don't financially work because they made a timber frame that's $1 million and they only make $200,000 worth of syrup a year. It wasn't meant for just straight maple syrup production. It was meant to be a showpiece. And I think those are kind of more difficult to buy into, unless you have another way to make money on a revenue stream, like Airbnb the house, or I have no idea. But I guess I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So I'm glad you brought it up. It was a good question. $2.5 million for 20,000 taps. 20,000 taps. If you made a half of 5 pounds per tap, what are you at? 5. So 100,000 pounds. What are you at? It is all math. And I've had this conversation with Brad Gillen too. Oftentimes people like to get in slow and they slowly grow. But in the end, what they end up doing is paying for more money than make sure I come back to that. All right. So yeah, 100,000 pounds. And I believe Farm Credit will only give you credit for 4 pounds per tap because they have so much information out there that they will only loan you on a 4 pound per tap average, because that's what the industry is making, which would be 80,000 pounds. So 2 semi-truck loads, roughly $200,000 in revenue. But then you have to, maintain it. $200,000 in revenue for a $2.5 million investment. It's not even, 10%. Good question. Yep. Jeff and Linda Corey just jumped on. Good evening, guys. The land in Vermont is very expensive, but the culture, so being able to, the learning curve, everyone, I think our county that I grew up in is like 1/4 the size of Vermont. Like, think about how many people. It's the greatest concentration of producers in the country, and they're able to learn from each other much faster than, 2 guys in Ohio that are 5 hours apart, or Wisconsin. Like a big producer in Wisconsin, Ohio, Michigan, they're the big dogs already. What do they got to learn? Well, when you're in Vermont, those guys are little dogs, and there's a lot more information transfer in concentrated maple areas. I think that's the true value. A couple questions. I was watching one of your old videos of you chasing leeks and noticed that you were creating more leeks by taking a knife and cutting the tubing off your tee. It was leaving a slice across the barb. True. There are people that will use like nippers. That tubing was 20 years old. I guess I want to put it in perspective. The reason I ripped all that tubing out is it was 20 years old. And it just wasn't even viable. I mean, when tubing was installed 20 years ago, it was way different. And, the production, like when I started meeting people like the Coreys, seeing how Jeff's doing it, Gary, Crocker. When I started meeting all these people, I realized, like, holy crap, man, I had no clue. And most of the people in the Midwest, there's very few operators like those guys, because they already are the big dogs. There's no one really pushing them to be better. I think information travels slower to the Midwest on technology. I think we end up, especially with Amish, purchasing equipment that is kind of phased out. It ends up in Ohio, Ray's auction. So if technology is phasing out, where are you going to sell it? If you want to go buy new, well, you got to go where people think that technology is still valuable, and it's probably better than what they're using anyway. So a lot of Midwestern, and I am that. Traveling from Minnesota to Maine and meeting maple producers has been eye-opening for me. But you are correct. I probably was making a micro leak, but that tubing had so much crap wrong with it that was not the biggest problem. And I incorrectly thought that I could overcome all those leaks with more vacuum. Just put them more, if that'll do 10,000 taps, it'll do 2,000. Well, all you do is you just make ice balls faster. That's what you do. So, yeah, you just make them faster, which made the tubing work even worse than if I had crappier vacuum, which is, remember the decision-making thing at the beginning of this, my logic, how flawed it was. So how was the Galt name made? You could just Google the character. Like, it's named after a character in a book. Protagonist. What else you guys got? We've been going for a bit. I've been going for a bit. It is so much easier to do live streams with people. I enjoy it. I really wanted to get David on here. He is now homeless. He sold his farm. What's he up to? I like doing live streams with people. It's way more fun than listening to myself talk. But yeah, so Evaporator, it is Galt Evaporator Company. Just, I'm starting from scratch and just starting with a few products, and I want to be good at what we do. Yeah, Jeff and Linda had a comment here. Vacuum is key to production. Fall vacuum checking is awesome. So, yeah, a lot of these guys, it's just a totally different culture. I will eventually build up the tubing. So when I say I'm going back to the beginning with buckets and spiles, washing buckets, cleaning buckets, and, pumping sap up into a head tank with, going back in time to the beginning, over the course of several years, I plan on progressing, and some people will with me. If somebody wants to get into maple and learn, and we'll start with a 2x8, and we'll just continuously grow and show the economics, just like with the small manual mill. I really think of the small manual sawmill I have kind of like owning a 2x6. It's really difficult to make money with a manual mill because of production time. So you're taking a pine log and you're turning it into board feet. It's great exercise. I enjoy it, but it's a manual mill. and it's difficult to make money unless you do some things. Like even with a mill, you could probably make more money with a longer mill if it was manual because you could make long timbers, which would be a specialty. So it's the same with evaporators. I think the way the rig is looking, the gasification arch, with the flash pan, which is a steam away basically, like 130, 140 gallon an hour on a 2x8. That's pretty good. I mean, I think 3x12s were probably doing that back in the day, So smaller footprint. And then I'll eventually, we'll start building ROs and, just little by little so people can grow with us. And like I said, if you want a 2x6, go buy a 2x6. It's a great way to start. If you would like to use the same amount of firewood and make more syrup, because that's the benefit. You're already putting the same amount of wood, cutting the same amount of wood in a 2x6. You might as well put it in a 2x8 because that heat's going to go up the stack. Another way to say it is the firebox for a 2x6 is too big. That's another way to say it. So here's a question that came to you, Jeff and Linda. Reese is asking, in a fall vacuum check, are you just trying to find all the big leaks? In my experience listening to them, I really think that they find them all. Like these guys that can run that perfect vacuum, essentially, like they know how to find leaks, man. And they don't just look for the big ones. They look for all of them because you're going to have to find it anyways. Why put off for tomorrow, which can be done today? So Todd's asking the question. How you doing, Todd? Todd Phillips asks, thoughts on vacuum sensors from your perspective on seeing many different systems. What do you think are the best ones? Recently ordered a setup from Farm Blocks for my woods. Should be a game changer. Yeah, I've used two different systems. The first thing I'll tell you is what you gain with the sensors in the woods is you gain sleep. And all of the things you think are happening in your woods, you're going to start finding out. My dad and I used to argue what was happening with the tubing. And then when we got sensors, we found out we were both wrong. So it truly tells you what's going on in your system. You'll get smarter about it. And you'll find where the ice is actually causing issues. Managing ice in your lines is critical because if there's ice in your system, sap can't flow. It's all about making sure sap can flow always. And the best ones. I am of the mindset, this is me, that it's the economics. I really liked the CDL system I had, mostly because I could, call, Mike Lynch and, get help, and he really helped set it up. And I valued that, but I know Mike personally. So I liked it. I sold it because I'm going to start over eventually, and I'll probably try different ones and partner with somebody. But I really like Farm Blocks because the economics were really good. Like at the time, a sensor was like $99. So from a cost standpoint, I don't think you can beat Farm Blocks. So being able to get into monitoring, it's just difficult to beat, Farm Blocks price. I don't know if that makes sense. So for me, that is a cost item, but they have added features since I've used it. And I would like to kind of catch up with those guys and see where technology is. But just having that technology is such a game changer. You're buying time, you're saving labor. I would say having a way to keep your concentrate cold is a game changer. I would say monitoring sensors, the reverse osmosis. I'm thinking about big game changers in the maple industry, the way we run vacuum now. Just amazing production. So Jeff and Linda said, you can find the smallest of leaks. Checked 1,100 taps, shut pump off 2.5 weeks ago. Still have 10 inches of vacuum on the releaser. Anybody in the Midwest doing that? Anybody? That's pretty impressive, Jeff. I assume, I don't know if it's Jeff or Linda, but I'm assuming Jeff. But yeah, I don't want to assume because they are a pretty darn good team. What else you guys got? Any stories I haven't finished? Remind me. Yeah, I am going to make content of just running my tube. I mean, the ideal customer for us is going to be somebody that's headed towards retirement, in retirement, or a serious hobby producer that wants their business to pay for itself. People with land, and looking for a way for their land to pay for itself, to help with property taxes. I think everybody should own a business. There's just so many benefits to be able to, if you're a gentleman farmer, being able to have tax benefits on depreciating assets. There's just so many benefits that way. Good comment here. Ryan says, Jeff and Linda just encouraged me to get out the door tomorrow morning. There you go. There you go. So I think, our 2x8, I just want to get really good at that one because there's people out there wondering if they should get a 2x6 or 2x8. And my advice is going to be get the 2x8. If you're already serious enough to buy a 2x6, you might as well increase your evaporation rate by 50% with the same amount of firewood. But now if you want to say, well, my sugar house, I get it. Yeah, I understand. You want it on right side draw off. We only do a left. I get it. That's okay. But if somebody hasn't built their sugar house yet, probably those are the people I'm looking for. They just don't want to monkey around, They don't want to goof around. They actually want to make something and get it done and make a little bit of income from their property. Those are the people that I really want to work with. But somebody who, my favorite, and this is Brad and I have talked about this. It is possible if you build it with the end in mind. But most people are kind of building it on their way and they never really think about space. And that's why the sugar house has 7 additions. And what is your plan? Where do you plan to be? And really understanding that from the beginning is going to help you. So, and I'm speaking from experience, I ended up putting 7 additions on my sugar house. It's stupid. I needed a shed door. I just kept building and building. And it's in the end, I could have bought my factory cash. It's silly. I look back at these mistakes, but anyways, yeah. Well, appreciate it, everybody. I probably didn't cover everything, but I did want to talk about doing the new Evaporator Company. Pretty excited about it. Just simple, basic. I'm going back to the beginning. Gonna have fun, do what I love. Started this with my dad and, ending it with my dad. So back to the beginning, wood-fired evaporator. Anyways, we will catch up with you guys.